and a very warm welcome to May's edition of Absolute Security's Patch Tuesday updates. And congratulations, if you're looking for the very best place to get advice on the latest Microsoft vulnerabilities and how to patch for them, then you've come to exactly the right place. I'm here with Rob Brown, Absolute Security's very own Patch Tuesday guru, and he is an expert on all things patching, automation, and endpoint management. Rob will be running us through the Patch Tuesday vulnerabilities and giving you advice on how to be a hero when it comes to keeping your endpoints safe. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Justine. A very warm welcome to everyone joining us today. It's a beautiful day here in the UK. The sun has finally come out. We have a very large Patch Tuesday again. I think this is probably the third or fourth 100+ fixes that we've had this year alone. Certainly lots of vulnerabilities to talk about and some really interesting trends that we're going to also discuss in further detail. We had 121 fixes, 18 critical, 103 were important. Now the stars you see on this page, in some of those fixes were automatically resolved by the vendor. So they provided information to us this month that they had fixed cloud-based infrastructure. And that is increasing month on month on month. Perhaps there is a highly sophisticated AI cyber threat hunting tool they're using. Perhaps they're just getting better at finding bugs in their own architecture, but that is a concern I have. That this is cloud-based infrastructure that we don't really have access to manage ourselves. So some of those fixes have been resolved automatically for us. 13 of the 121 are more likely to be weaponized, and that is quite a large number, only second to last Patch Tuesday. Luckily for us, none are weaponized yet. None are public aware yet. That can change day to day, so do keep an eye on the state of the vulnerability. If any of it does become weaponized, it must accelerate the deployment of the fix. And we have 21 jump points. This is a very, very large number, and this is a hidden risk in your organization. A jump point is what is called a scope change. A scope change means that if you can expose this vulnerability, you can leave that vulnerability. In fact, my greatest analogy for this is Hyper-V. Hyper-V is very popular. It is a virtualization of an operating system on an operating system. Lots of developers use it, lots of IT admins use it to have test machines running on their Windows 11 operating system. If you are able to exploit a vulnerability in one of those guests, you perhaps can jump to the host. Perhaps you can jump from guest to guest. And guess what? We just have one of those in this Patch Tuesday. We have a Hyper-V vulnerability that has a scope change, which means there is a risk from going from guest to guest, guest to host, or the other way around. So we do need to pay particular attention to the scope change. They are a hidden risk and sometimes not known by many security admins that these threats exist. If we take a look at our leaderboard, elevation of privilege, once again, every month so far this year, elevations of privilege have been at the top. This is what I call the enabler, and we're going to talk more about that today, especially in relation to how this forms part of an attack chain. Elevation of privilege is a vulnerability that allows an attacker to gain higher permissions than they're authorized to have, such as a normal user obtaining admin or system level privilege. We have 61 fixes. Remote code execution, in my opinion, is the most severe. It's the one that's used in ransomware attacks. That's where an attacker can execute arbitrary code on a target system remotely, often without authentication. And it's usually considered the most dangerous because it can lead to full system compromise. We have 32 fixes. Information disclosure, this is also extremely serious. That is where you can access sensitive information that should be protected. This comes often in the form of memory reads or CPU access, where you can read usernames and passwords that are supposed to be passed through in encrypted format. But if you can read it in memory, it often is available in clear text. This is used in connection to spoofing. So actually using phishing attempts by passing through email addresses that you've captured through information disclosure. Spoofing is used is where you have an attack that impersonates another user. So it's just pretending to be somebody else, where the system that is there to protect that type of thing from not happening is bypassed. We have 12 fixes. Denial of service, just simply trying to make the system fail, using the system resources to crash or hang the device. We have 9 fixes. And at the bottom of the leaderboard, but certainly not the least serious, security feature bypass. That's a vulnerability that allows an attacker to bypass or evade a security mechanism, such as an authentication, a sandbox, or exploit mitigation. Now, if you haven't built a risk profile, then may I be so bold to recommend one to you. Your environment is unique, and long ago there used to be the strategy of criticality first. It used to be everything that was critical gets deployed. In fact, lots of governance standards still use that particular strategy. You must deploy the criticals, you must deploy the highs or importance. And that's all you need to achieve that accreditation. What those governance standards don't know or haven't been updated to capture are the vulnerabilities that are lower severity that are used in an attack chain, which is why we like to use multiple selection criteria to protect your organization. We do use, however, the vendor severity at step number 1. That is critical, high or important, medium, low, and NA. That is issued by the vendor, and we still want to use the vendor's severity as a source of truth, but we don't want to depend on it. That is why we use the CVSS score as well. Now, the CVSS score is a calculation out of 10. It is built independently and reassessed independently by NIST, and that allows us to correctly combine the vendor severity and the CVSS score together to give us more awareness of the type of severity this is. A lot of vendor updates, such as the browsers, do issue their browser updates with an NA severity, but when assessed by CVSS score, it's critical. So if you combine the two together, you have a better strategy for capturing the most serious threats to your organization. Next, we have the state of the vulnerability. This is disconnected to the vendor severity and CVSS score. In fact, weaponized vulnerabilities, that is a vulnerability that's used in an active attack, sometimes the vendor doesn't change the severity at all. Sometimes they do, but often they don't. So if you have a vulnerability that was medium risk that becomes weaponized, you need to somehow capture that in your system. And if you have automation, if you have a playbook that can automatically detect weaponized threats and begin the rollout automatically, that would be highly useful. It's the technology that we have available in our own platform. Public aware doesn't mean that you're finding out through this webinar. I'm sorry to say, public aware is slightly more serious. It means somebody has published the exact blueprint of how to exploit a vulnerability. This is very common since 2025 to place those public aware vulnerabilities on YouTube. In fact, one of the most famous ones was a Minecraft video where they showed you how to exploit log4j in a YouTube video. Very useful. But when a vulnerability is public aware, it doesn't always mean it becomes weaponized. In fact, the statistics show that about 90% of public aware vulnerabilities never do get weaponized. And that's because sometimes the exact method to exploit a vulnerability is very difficult. It's not simple. You need to have several things in place, several avenues need to be true in order to exploit it. And that's not always the case in every organization. But I wouldn't want to be an IT security manager that saw a public aware vulnerability and I didn't resolve it simply because it wasn't yet weaponized. This is an early warning system for you. Now, countermeasures, they offer us a way of resolving the vulnerability without deploying the patch. And this often comes in the form of vendor guidance or mitigation guidance. So it might be that you have a local policy that you can change. It might be a registry key. It might be a permission you can modify. It might also be a highly sophisticated antivirus that you have that is mitigating the vulnerability. Countermeasures should be considered every time. If you have a high severity vulnerability that's being weaponized, if there is a countermeasure available, such as one of those registry keys I mentioned, use your workflow-based systems management tool to go and remotely deploy the registry key. That resolves the problem. It can resolve the problem much, much quicker than rolling out a 1 or 2 gigabyte cumulative update. If you deploy the countermeasure, you resolve the risk. Do be paying attention, though, to the vendor's own guidance around the removal of that countermeasure. If the vendor suggests that you should remove the keys or change the policies that you've changed in order to mitigate the vulnerability, reverse those. Just use your playbook-based systems management tool to reverse the change you made, and that would be done after you've deployed the patch. Maybe even link the two together. So deploy the patch and reverse the countermeasure that you applied. In highly distributed environments, we understand that rolling out large updates, especially if there are reboot combinations, can be very, very end user disruptive. So do pay particular attention to the countermeasures. They are your superpower when it comes to resolving vulnerabilities at scale. And finally, your exposure. Your exposure is the most important. A vulnerability that is low severity, high exposure, and weaponized should be the number one remediation effort, rather than a critical severity that's not weaponized, that's only on 5 or 10% of your estate. Combine all these factors together and you will have a better strategy for resolving the threats that are the greatest in your own environment. Now, what we're going to do now is pop across to our website. We do publish all of our details on Patch Tuesday on our website, which is absolute.com. Here you'll find how we can support your organization to stop downtime. We have lots of articles on how you can help your organization become more cyber resilient. On our resources page, you have our fantastic Absolute blog, where we publish articles not just on Patch Tuesday, but on how to secure your organization, new threats that are coming. Of course, the Patch Tuesday written by myself, where we're going to go into some details. We also have a really handy download, which we're going to talk about as well in a few minutes. Now, as I said, we had 121 fixes this month across multiple areas of the ecosystem, from Windows, operating system components, Office 365, Teams, SharePoint. There's a trend here. These are all trusted tools across the Microsoft ecosystem. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. We did have a few fixes that are automatically resolved for us. Thank you, Microsoft. But that number is increasing, and I'm becoming more worried that a threat at the cloud level can actually come down to our endpoints at some point in the future. Let's talk about it. The enterprise trust layer is under fire. This is because a lot of new attackers, the more modern attackers, are looking at adjacent systems next to each other, collaboration platforms, administrative tools, rather than just endpoints. Vulnerabilities like SharePoint, as I mentioned, Dynamics 365, Teams, Office, Microsoft trust boundaries, they offer high value returns because compromising one system can yield broad access. Imagine your users have a pop-up on their screen that says Microsoft Teams must be updated, and it has an OK or a cancel. What would your users do? They trust Teams, they use it. We're using it today to make this recording. Would they know the difference between an actual Teams update and something that was made to look like a Microsoft Teams update? Trusted platforms like that, they inherit trust automatically, and that is why attackers continue to target them. So those trusted tools must be your absolute priority in this Patch Tuesday. Now, as I mentioned, AI and cloud services, they are continuing to expand the attack surface. In fact, each month this year, we've had more AI-powered updates than we've ever seen, perhaps because that is more broadly being used across Microsoft clients, such as AI workflows, cloud administration, collaboration tools, as I mentioned. This is really important because we are using more of these tools to become more optimized and efficient. And in fact, they become part of our daily operation. And for many organizations, they're quickly becoming infrastructure rather than just tools. So we do need to pay close attention to what are being fixed in the cloud by Microsoft. Is it possible that at some point those cloud tools that we're using can impact our endpoints? Work with your customer success team, with your technical account managers at Microsoft, and ask them, what can we do to mitigate any risk that a cloud infrastructure breach could access the endpoint, and follow the guidance. It could be an antivirus, it could be firewalls, it could be multi-factor authentication. Extremely important that you take their advice and protect what you can, however you can. Now, we talked about privilege escalation. This is what I call the enabler, and it's part of an attack chain that we've been talking about now for about 6 months. We have a huge number of escalation privilege vulnerabilities this month, from Win32k and Windows kernel. Guess what? That's come up since a particular antivirus caused blue screen issues last year. Had a lot of Windows kernel updates. TCP/IP, again, cloud file mini filter driver vulnerabilities again. DWM core again. Ancillary function driver for WinSock again. These are vulnerabilities that have been fixed and fixed and fixed for months now. I wonder if they'll actually get to the bottom of what's causing these fixes to be made. But the risk here is that several of these are exploitation more likely. That simply reinforces that pattern that we're talking about. We do need to look at the attack chain, not just individual patches. Attack chains, if you're not familiar with attack chains, go take a look at some of the previous webinars where we've actually described some of those attack chains in detail. Basically, that means if you can access a system through a low-level vulnerability, maybe something that's not critical, something that's not high or important severity, that initial access, if exploited, could lead to privilege escalation, turning your account from standard user to system level permissions. Here you can now have lateral movement within an organization, leave breadcrumbs that if perhaps at some point in the future a vulnerability was resolved where you initially accessed, you could still access that remote organization. And at this point, you've got operational disruption at any point. Very, very serious that we try to address the attack chain at the very earliest step, so that removes any link between that particular exploit and further lateral movement in the organization. We also have a huge number of Microsoft Office risks as well, not just in Microsoft Office as an application, but in Word and Excel. Some are using the preview pane as an attack vector. This is very serious. Preview panes are really useful for efficiency to read an email, or if you're in Windows, you can click a Word file or an Excel file, and the preview pane can just give you what's inside it. Instead of double clicking everything, Just take a look inside. Just looking at a file or an email, if it's embedded with this highly sophisticated payload, you could actually become fully compromised. You can turn these off, but your users can turn them back on again. So let's make sure that we prioritize these office updates, and we will talk more about priorities in just a few minutes. We've also got some Windows Net Logon and DNS client remote code execution vulnerabilities to fix. Those are the more of the traditional ones that are used in compromise. Now, we talked about trust boundaries. They matter more than ever. Several vulnerabilities this month impact deeply trusted Windows components like Win32k, Windows kernel, etc. These components help Windows separate user activity, application permissions, and system level operations. Now, successful exploitation may allow attackers to move standard user access, as we've mentioned, into higher privileged accounts, blending into normal operation behavior. Now, imagine a zombie process that is part of the ecosystem, but it is not managed by Windows anymore. It's being managed by a remote attacker. How do you know the difference? That is very serious. So we do need to make sure that these tools that form part of that trust boundary are automatically resolved. It's some of the most important ones that we can resolve so that we can be more proactive in resolving these threats. Please try your best not to allow somebody into your organization in the first place, but if they do, let's try to build resilience so we can restore those systems at scale. So how to become the hero this month? Well, please prioritize any vulnerability that's marked exploitation more likely, or where there is a high score from our download sheet. We'll see that in just a second. Treat privilege escalation vulnerabilities as urgent because they are the enabler, especially when combined with low friction initial access paths in your organization. Let's make sure we prioritize those Office, SharePoint, dynamic remote code execution vulnerabilities, especially if they have a preview pane. And I'm going to tell you exactly which ones in a second. Let's also try to build resilience into our organization. Recovery speed really matters. It really isn't a question of if you are going to be compromised. At some point, you will be compromised, even if it's a small compromise. When that happens, can you restore your endpoints to a healthy state at scale? If you can, wonderful. If you can't, and you would like to discuss that with us, please give us 10 or 15 minutes of your time. We can walk you through how our firmware-enabled technology will allow you to, at scale, restore any compromised system to a working state, whether that is rolling back a problematic update or in fact doing a full operating system rehydrate back to a known gold build image. That is how you can reduce downtime. Let's take a little look at the download sheet. The download sheet, which you'll find in PDF format, is 11 pages long. Wow, these are getting quite large. Now, interesting, 3 pages of the download sheet include CVSS severities above 9.0. That is quite unique for Microsoft Patch Tuesday. 9.0 is where the CVSS score changes from high to critical. Anything above 9.0 is critical. The maximum is 10. Guess what? We have a 10 here for the first time in several months. Luckily for us, that's already mitigated by Microsoft. No action is required. Take a look at this list. Put the CVE code here into your tool set. If you have exposure in your organization, place the percentage over in your action plan. Go down several pages, organizing the exposure based on your percentage, and place those updates that are required into 4 groups. Priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4. We don't say high priority, low priority, because any vulnerability, as I've mentioned, can be used in full system compromise. Work out what vulnerabilities are unique to you. If there is a countermeasure, you'll find that written and detailed in the additional information. If it is weaponized, you'll find it under the weaponized column. Luckily for us, there aren't any. Organize the threats to your organization using this sheet and deploy them as urgently as you can. Finally, let's talk about the Windows lifecycle. The Windows lifecycle depends on something called a feature update. That feature update allows the operating system to remain compliant, but also allows patches to be applied. Patches are simple updates to the operating system. Feature updates are upgrades to the operating system. It's very important that you stay within compliance. If you're using Server 2012, you are in year 3 of the ESU, which comes end of life in 5 months' time. So please move off 2012 as quickly as you can. If you are using Windows 11 23 H2, you have till November this year to upgrade to another feature update. We recommend 25 H2. We are aware that there's 26 H1 available, or very soon, but we would recommend 25 H2 because we've tested it and it's really reliable. We understand these take time to deploy. So if you are still not deployed, if you still haven't deployed your feature updates and you would like to get some advice on best practices, use the chat function on the website, the YouTube channel, or LinkedIn, and we will provide best guidance on how to remotely resolve these threats. These can take as little as 15 minutes, but we have seen them take as long as 2 hours, depending on how out of date the systems are. So it will require some end user disruption, but we try to minimize that as best as possible. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're delighted to present the May Patch Tuesday to you. If there is anything you need, please do get in touch. And until next time, I wish you happy patching.
Thanks for all those insights, Rob. Good stuff. As we know, AI is getting smarter and so are the threats. So I'd like to invite you to join Absolute Security's CISO, Harold Rivas, and Ashley Leonard, our Senior VP of Product Management, for a 45-minute webinar on May 19th to discover how AI-driven threats are reshaping cyber risk, why downtime is becoming inevitable, and what you can do to stay operational. You'll be able to learn what new models like Mythos signal for the future, how attackers are accelerating at machine speed, and practical steps you can take to strengthen cyber resilience and maintain business continuity. So if you want to save your seat and get ready to outpace disruption, you can find the sign-up page using this QR code here. And as Rob mentioned, if you're in need of specific advice about resilience or patching, then please contact us via the website or use the QR code here. And thank you from myself as well as Rob. We really appreciate your time and feedback. And finally, don't forget to like and subscribe.